Peter the Great. Remember that this morning we was here. She drove by and she stopped us. Came
Over
down
here?
for 10 minutes taking picture over there.
Where?
Peter the Great over there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, she was talking about
Yeah.
the greatest, the biggest swimming pool in the whole world.
Oh, right
Là
here.
cái này nè.
Oh,
And then it's rebuilt.
oh, I don't recall that. Yeah.
Nửa liềm với búa đó đây nè. Nửa liềm với búa với sao? Đúng như Việt Nam vậy đó. Việt Nam mình cũng được.
Cái đó. Ok, vô như chờ.
Đấy cái xe ren, cái biết mà ren, cái biết là ren không?
No. Yeah.
We did cheap. We stayed at the. Which one?
Tropicana.
Ken, which one were we at?
Sahara.
Last in April. Yeah, the
Oh,
Sahara.
Sahara.
But you know what?
Какой день ходите? Вы можете запомнить, какую карточку.
Like what happened? It's the room in Cosmos Hotel in Moscow.
Six already.
Yeah.
And the church and that.
We probably have no time to go to the museum because
Okay,
take some picture here. This is a memorial park.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gasoline is just 61 for 1 liter. So $1 1 liter. So about $5. About $5 a gallon or something a gallon. Rumbling.
Bà thấy gì cây cối mà bà nói rầm liên gì bà chưa tới mà bà không thấy bà chưa phải mà bà đang rầm liên rồi coi thấy cây cối rồi.
On our right, we're going to pass by the only entrance to Kremlin for official cars. There's no regular traffic there in Kremlin, but President and several other people can.
Rumbling. Where's the rumbling?
Yeah. It's tired too. What happened? Africa đó, ông bao quát qua cái chỗ mà cái red là cái đỏ đỏ mà radio station đó.
Here there are all of Moscow was inside the walls of Kremlin during the first two centuries of its existence. And the walls are on one of the tops of Kremlin. These stars are quite large, they are over 3 meters and they rotate with the wind. When it is windy you can notice it because otherwise they would be broken. This in front of us is a nice yellow building which is former arsenal, built by Peter the Great at the very end of the 17th century. Later it was surrounded by cannons. There are quite many, the number is about 800, and they are French war trophies taken from Napoleon after his panic retreat from Moscow. They were a bit too heavy to carry them back home. He had to leave them. And this horrible building, which gives us some nice friendly shade, is the latest addition to Kremlin. It was built by Nikita Khrushchev, 1961. Anything to kind of to stick it to.
Yeah.
1920s there they lived Lenin, later Stalin. Now it is the office of the president in this very building. We mentioned our presidents live anywhere they wish as private people, which is quite practical because they don't need to move. What was built in 1930s is a school for Red Commissars. And it looks very discreet as far as older buildings are concerned. It's the
Тебе уже не... Смотри, какие
in the following way, they dug a hole in the ground. Inside they put the molding food, and then they poured the hot metal. When the metal became hot, the bell was complete. They took this bell out of the hole, put it on wooden beams, and it was covered with wood.
Certified.
Chắc mình cũng phải học, cũng phải lên.
Pass, phải pass. Con giống như nào ở đâu đó.
Việt Nam cũng vậy thôi. Con cứ nói bậy bạ.
Is the private cathedral for the royal family. They attended services here every day, and Russian royalty was baptized and wedded in this cathedral. This white building on our right is called Faceted Palace. It is the oldest circular building built 1480. Otherwise, it's churches which are so old, but this is the oldest circular building. This is a part of the royal residence. The ambassadors were received, negotiations were conducted, and such like. This wide arch with double-headed eagle on top and the steps in Russian are called Krasное Крыльцо, which means red entrance, though the color is evidently white. This is another proof that the word red meant beautiful. And this did not exist in the Soviet time, because after October Revolution, this arch and the steps were destroyed. And when Yeltsin came to what you see now, I mean this arch and the steps, this is a replica. He wanted to connect some of the tribute power. For the same reason, it was reconstructed by Yeltsin. Partly the inauguration ceremony of the president starts on these very steps as well. This is year 1480. It has quite a long name for such a tiny building, the Church of the Deposition of the Sacred Row. It is so little because it was the private church for Russian patriarchs. And behind you can see very picturesque palace with little gold domes. This is called Tsaritsa's Chamber Palace. It was a female part of the royal residence where Tsaritsas and Tsarevnas lived, and there was a small church right there in case they wanted to confess about some sins, not in the presence of their husband. Here to Moscow to be crowned. Here this is the oldest building, completed the year 1479. This is Bell Tower in front of you, oldest Bell Tower. The tallest building in Moscow. That's why the upper part was built as a watchtower.
Nó nói là chắc tin gì đó, chắc bảo quắt ra đây nè.
Wow. Này cũng quá nhiều anh ơi.
Quá trời luôn ba ơi.
А я туда можно глянуть?
Gì?
Cái đó đồ ăn nó cân. Bỏ lên cân như cân. Oh my god, tourist mà mấy con mình không cho tiếp được nhưng mà làm tour guide mà muốn được tiền tiếp đó là phải nặng. Cái số chết đó, bà thấy mất 4 đồng mà cũng đâu có muốn đi.
Nhưng mà nhiều khi không có tiền sao?
Thiệt đâu có muốn đi.
Illumination. Ai nói? Ai nói Disneyland?
Bà nói nhìn giống như Disneyland.
Bà hả?
Ừ, bà nói.
Ủa, bà biết Disneyland sao?
Chắc bà có đi, đã có đi LA rồi mà không biết. Mỹ thôi, có một cái store chút xíu thôi. Mà biết tụi Nga này nó cũng ăn chơi, bây giờ chắc nó cũng dữ lắm rồi. Chứ nếu không nó mở ra mà nó không bán được làm sao nó mở để không à. Phải không? Phải có người mua chứ. Ra ngoài này. Đây nè. Cái chàng gian nại nải luôn. Vô cái gì này coi mà.
Flamingo. Này thử đi. Here. That's Red Square. Moscow.
Giờ là nó bật.
Just a little bit further up from here, and the monuments would show that you were going from one republic to another. It's coming up here on the left-hand side. It's looking rather weathered, but this cement monument on the left-hand side that has a picture of the Russian flag and the Belarusian flag on it. So that is the border point between the two countries, and the monument you can see beyond it, it has listed the names of all the cities between Moscow and Minsk. It also had on it rather odd things, but it had showing where there were parking spots. Didn't mention is that most of them had no petrol, and so you knew when you were driving, say, Moscow to Minsk, you had to make sure you started off with a full tank, because it was virtually impossible finding bought tokens or vouchers on the border, official vouchers.
Russian border to Belarus. Cafe.
Got by my watch, it's 2:10 Belarusian time, and also in the roads here should be a little bit smoother because we've just paid $3 to drive on it. Russians sometimes are a little bit outraged having to pay for most of the roads here through the country. These are toll roads, and they think that it's strange having to pay for them because the bulk of this road was constructed where it never actually got finished at all, so it stops halfway once it gets into Russia. But most of the route, once you get into Belarus, is actually not bad at all. There's some sections where they're still working on it and improving it so far. Well, I'm just looking at the moment. The sun has come out, but I'm afraid that the sun might be a little bit deceptive. Possibly to instigate a plan B at the moment. The plan B being, if available, to make an earlier stop at a cafe or somewhere where there may be a toilet or toilets available rather than the bush. The last one I just went to check out, they only had one. That was it. Land, large distances, sparsely populated. So it looks, one can notice already once you cross the border from Russia that it looks a little bit different. Another thing that the country is characterized by are also vast forests everywhere. The population density here in Belarus is actually, by European standards, is very low. It's approximately 50 people per square kilometer, so it does look very, very sparsely populated. Also, you will see less trappings of commercialism as we pass through the country as well. So whereas in Russia you can see advertising and billboards everywhere, you don't see very much of that here in Belarus. You'll see in Minsk there are some, but not very much. So the population here in this country, it's in the region of about 10.4 million people at the moment. But the makeup is very, very varied. They are not all Belarusians, but you have people living here who are Belarusians. There are people of Russian origin, Polish, Ukrainian, from Kazakhstan, from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and so forth. And most of the ethnic Belarusians are living mainly in the western part of the country. Also, many ethnic Belarusians emigrated from here too, so the proportion of Russians to Belarusians is very high. In particular, many Belarusians emigrated to countries like to Canada, to the United States, UK, other European countries. It's estimated that in the region of about 1 million Belarusians living abroad. The name of the country, it translates, if you divide up the word Belarus into two words, Biela, which is the word for white, and Rus is Russia. And the name is interpreted in many different ways. And there are various versions of this. Some people will say, well, it's white Russia, they associate it with politics. But this is actually not So it's associated, people will say, oh, white Russian politics, but this is actually not a correct estimate at all. Sometimes it's linked to, you know, the civil war after the revolution, reds and whites, but that is just illusion, that has no truth at all. Now, produced during Stalin's era, very early on, and it was a political goal and ideal. And during the early years of collectivization, they say that people were literally starving. There was famine because many of the farmers, rather than give their land away to the...
Nó cũng đẹp ha, xanh, cỏ xanh mướt.
Official language of the country nowadays is Belarusian, and Belarusian is very, very close to Russian and to Ukrainian. These three Slav languages are very, very close. They are, one could say, people can understand each other when they're speaking, but as written languages they are not the same. Statistically, 77% of the population of this country are native Belarusians, and about 14% are Russians. But from the linguistic point of view, you will not find that number of people speaking the Belarusian language. From the Soviet times, the language issue was something that was very poignant here and in many other republics, because it was from Stalin's time onwards, it was a policy of the country to have this, what they called Russification, to be built from soil that was brought from all the different Soviet republics, brought by hand. And it's now a place, apart from just being a monument, that's occupied very, very quickly. You'll see tomorrow again we're taking the route coming from Brest to Minsk, which is the route that the German forces occupied, especially ones like Lonely Planet. I always see that many people have that when they're traveling. And to the Russian alphabet. So you can see the letter I they use just like the Latin letter in mirror for the E, the letter E. But otherwise, more or less, it's used. Then electrical goods, things like refrigerators and so on, and also watches as well, which used to be known, the brand name for them used to be the Luch watch factory. It's the focal point that it will reach is a square which is known as the Victory Square, so we can make a stop when we get there as well. So just for then you can see massive construction work going on all the time. The city is expanding rather quickly. All these areas around here, this is all being built over the last 5 years.
Giống như điên đằng kia thôi.
Giống thì khác khác, cái trí giống giống gì. Giống như
as a population would have an underground system, and Minsk reached in 1970 just over 1 million their population, and so they had an underground built, and it looks like you can see here to accommodate all these. And the economy here, that Belarus has had rather an unusual post-1991 independence history as well, in that the system here is kind of a mixture between a communist and a free market economy. It is not totally how it was during the Soviet times, in that there was no free market whatsoever, that everything is state-owned. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Belarus formed its own republic. So they went from being known as the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic to taking the name Belarus, and they declared their independence. One of their main problems as being independent is, as with many of the other republics, is that they were provided with fuel supplies. The most important thing, they need gas. The various republics provided each other with services and goods at near on cost price, and they were unable to actually pay for this. They say that already by the mid-90s they had something like in excess of $450 billion worth of debt to Russia. And so they formed this called CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States, but within it they are still an independent country. They still today don't have the fuel supplies that they need, but they do have certain raw materials available. The president at the moment is in his third term, President Lukashenko I mentioned, who was elected to power by the people, but many people here say that the last election was rigged, and that he has also changed the terms of the contract. It's quite interesting. If you look at these apartment blocks over towards the right, you can see some of the decorations on the facades and on the sides of the mosaics as well. Very much this socialist realism style of architecture, of design and painting, but nevertheless it just distinguishes each building one from the other. And Russians are always very scathing about Belarus, but it was always a little bit different even during the Soviet years. So if you look on the left, look at this building here. This is the new library that they have just completed, with its 13 million or capable of having 13 million volumes. At the moment, apparently 8 million volumes, books in there. It's also, we're always sort of quite scathing about Belarusians a little bit, and if you were to travel here, say, with the Russian guide, then they would just shrug their shoulders and say, well, what's all the fuss about here? What's the difference? It's all part of one country, and they're always making a fuss. Compare at all to Russia, even when they adopted their own currency was devalued so many times that the Russian ruble was like hard currency here. But you look at built in the 70s, and then there's a park here on the left-hand side. The main factories, which is the former Luch factory, which was the name of the watch factories. They still produce watches here, but the brand name has changed. So So again, you'll see, looking at the buildings on either side of the street, this is quite reminiscent, if you can remember, when we were leaving St. Petersburg, the exit that we took, which was the Moscow Avenue, Moscow Prospect, and houses, buildings that were all built during the 1950s, during the Stalin era, but you can see with quite elaborate facades, not high rises, but usually 4 or 5 story buildings. And these all, so they were built according to this communist ideal that everything should be local. So on top you can see there are usually 4 or 5 stories of houses, and on the ground level always and it's the Academy of Sciences. Many of the buildings at right, you can see the green one with the white columns, that's part of a technical institute.
Oh,
Nó bự con.
And then you'll see just on the right-hand side another park and garden fountains with a statue in the middle, which is dedicated to a Belarusian writer, author called Yakub Kolas. So here's the figure in the middle, and around him are figures from his different works. He is known as a classic Belarusian author. And then the avenue will lead, you'll see already in a moment, there will be a monument coming up in the center of the street, which is the Victory Monument. Allowed to park along here, but we can maybe make a short photo stop, because this is the focal point of the city. You can get
Victory Monument. In Belarus.
Domed building, which is a Belarusian circus, state circus, and they still have their own circus company here, and the circus is still quite popular. But I of the city's main squares, with the what's called the Palace of the Republic, which are government buildings over here towards the right-hand side. Buildings behind us, this looks like a theatre, like the Bolshoi almost, is a trade union building. And the advert, again, that you can see on top of this building ahead of us, Gorizont, is an electrical company, which is the company that Lee Harvey Oswald, where he was. Central Square and the Victory Square and the avenue between them. This is the equivalent of what would be like Red Square in Moscow. In that they had.
Những khách sạn của mình gần đây nè, vậy cũng được, tối quắc ra đây chơi được. Hồi nãy có nói 1 đồng của nó là bao nhiêu tiền đây? 1.200 hả? $1 là 1.200. Mà nó xài đô la mà. Phải không?
You'll see just alongside the cathedral here towards the right, we cross over this avenue, and then you can see, again, this is part of the Svislach River, and the area just coming up now towards the right-hand side, where you can see the various coloured houses. This is not, none of it is original at all. It was completely reconstructed after the war, and reconstructed in the style of an old town, and there are bars and cafes, water. And then there is a modern
yeah, the police drive a tractor.
That's what happens when you park your car where you shouldn't. And it goes over, can you see there's a little island it goes over to, with a tiny monument in the middle of it, and that's known as the Island of Tears, and it was put there in the 19th island, so that's the Island of Tears. And this is just a great big sports hall that you can see on the right hand side here. By that sports hall, actually talking about well, tragic events, there is also a little monument there, memorial, commemorating in 1999 there was an accident there. I mentioned the city has this metro system, and back in 1999 there were 93 people were killed, and literally hundreds of people were injured, crushed, and people were killed. And then towards the right, that tall building that you can see is the Belarus Hotel. So that tall building's a hotel. Then there are also two hotels along here, towards the left and towards the right. One over towards the right, which is the Planeta Hotel. Sometimes the Planeta and the other one towards the left, Jubilania, are jokingly referred to as the Sheraton and the Hilton. The Planeta being the Hilton. Then the lifts will be just beyond the reception, you'll see straight on. The restaurant is, as one comes into the lobby, you'll see a corridor going along the left-hand side, and then there is a stairway. Generally there is a room on the first level, so I will just check for the dinner time when we arrive, what time dinner is booked for us. Normally, it's requested for 7 o'clock, but I will confirm that. So you can link to the main hotel by a corridor, and it's up. Then I will put the departure time up on the...
Hotel we stay tonight. Hả? Cũng được. Cũng nghèo. Em con to lớn không? To dễ sợ không?
Quite interesting.
We went to Shanghai, Beijing,
Tia Island.
yeah,
Memorial
Hangzhou,
of people died in Afghanistan. This one, this memorial. People died in Afghanistan. They call Tia Island.
In Beijing, we just went to the Imperial Palace,
Tiananmen
Summer
Square.
Palace, and Tiananmen Square.
No,
No feeling. Xi'an is beautiful.
You see the terracotta site.
Oh yeah, terracotta. Oh,
The famous of that.
because when we went to Hong Kong, we went to the border of Hong Kong.
Go down here. Go down here.
No shop here. What's up, Dubai? What's up?
Just the restaurant right here. Okay.
Just now that building looks like closed. The shopping mall like that. You know the white one?
No, maybe on the other side of the street.
The other side. You want to get back there?
Yeah.
Because here you can't get any souvenir. And tomorrow.
Nhiều khi tụi nó tuyết cửa đây chật chội nè.
Tia Island Memorial. due to memorial for people who died in Afghanistan. This is Tea Island, approached by this bridge.
Làm cũng tội á ha. Nice spot for a picture.
No, that one looks like Egyptian.
They must have
Egyptian?
some kind of
No, this one for Afghanistan. The memorial for the people here. They go to Afghanistan to fight and then die. You remember? You heard Anne told you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that no, not Egyptian. No, Afghanistan people.
Я в этом году в Воронеже пришла, и мы смотрели мультфильм, вот фильм такой был. И это сам, я пугалась. Вот так, тачки. И Вера говорит, слушай, говорит, деревню вывезли, а там везде кричат, они на... Вай, вот так вот закрывают. Деньги бросают, перелоговал. И наша тут была слышала, как это
If day, maybe we can go. You can go in. Yeah, I know.
Because I saw a chair there. People, maybe for the. We got home late.
No, no.
Oh, maybe this dress is
이거 지금 어떻게 되는지.
We saw it, you didn't tell us.
That's very nice structure. Okay, we go back.
They rob you.
We're leaving Belarus. Go to Poland.
Cái tiếng này, cái chữ Y nó có cái dấu gì đằng trước, đằng trên đầu á. Cắt mà hay tệ. Dấu giống như cái dấu ớ của mình. Building mới không ha, mới không?
Given to the city, and then that was the outer city limit. So from here the highway starts towards the border. Normally, as I said, we count about 4 hours with driving, and then we'll make petrol stations. But again, the problem with most of these is that they don't have facilities. They are but will come up soon before we get to the border with Poland. There's a large area which is a national park called the Białowieża Puszcza. It extends from Belarus into Poland, and it's
Rest stop here. Mấy người không nhìn có 20 không?
Here,
Yeah, yeah.
orientation shows us the limb. It sort of looks much better than it is, because all we did was drive through.
Ở cao mà máy
Máy tại vì mùa đông
trước
nó
á,
tuyết nó đỏ. Cây gì mà cháy quá trời cháy luôn.
bắp bây giờ cái bắp bây giờ
like 1 kilometer crossing from one country to the other, and yet although the geography and the geology doesn't change at all, you'll see that landscape changes quite quickly because of the, let's say, the social nature of the two countries. And whilst you can see around here wide open spaces, the area is very sparsely populated, houses dotted around the place, and small farms, and then later collective farms, but it looks like very wide open.
something.
Jumping around. Mấy người ở đây là người nào cũng ngực bự nha, bự khủng lồ luôn. Mấy người ở đây là dân bự ngực bự lắm.
Start in the middle of the road. They will have a series of names of cities from the former Soviet Union. They have actually all the names have been changed, or the symbols for them. They were formerly, while this country was part of the Soviet Union, they had all the names of the cities in Russian. But now, as Belarusian is the official name of the country, they have changed them into the Belarusian version, which, again, to a foreigner, it wouldn't hit you in the face straight away. But it does look quite significant when you are coming here, if you can read these signs. Sent here for construction, religious architecture for constructing buildings, and Belarus and from Russia, and it is rather an elaborate looking construction you can see coming up towards the left hand side. And again, because of this concept that there was no reconstruction during the Soviet times. So you can see, for example, the symbol of the city of Moscow, Moskva, over towards the left, and with the symbol of the city and also the award. Different churches, old churches and rebuilt ones or newly built ones after the war. And there are some very interesting experimental religious architecture that you will see in Poland, both traditional architecture and experimental architecture, which you don't really see here. They are trying to copy old. These were all, again, reconstructed, everything built after the war.
Let's see the better. Đây cứ có nè. Belarus. Near the press, the city near press, near the border of Belarus and Poland.
Вот эта книжка. И выписали гарантию, которая у них с гарантийным талоном.
nói tiếng mấy thằng tài xế là biết nói tiếng đó nữa.
What is it then?
She's gone in there with him.
Yeah.
The first time we had to have a visa, we had to go through to France.
Yeah.
And they just
Start
There's a lot of history there.
Let's get a beam spot.
A sign on the right-hand side telling you that you're entering the Republic of Poland. Also entering the EU as well here, so you can see just behind the police van there's one as well for European Union. When we get up to the Polish checkpoint, we just need to go and pay the road taxes various here, and then we'll be on our way. So if you can just stay on the coach while we do that, and then we will press on from here on to Warsaw. Too bad by Belarusian standards that there are certain things one can physically calculate timing-wise, that when they have to actually process the passports there. The price that they paid for this building, and usually they will